think it's important to not just research this, but go to the ancient origins. I mean, we can deal with the definitions. And what I realized, growing up in theology and growing up at church and all that was that the evangelical definition, even the Catholic definition of a demon, doesn't really fit the phenomenon.
Yeah.
The phenomenon itself is larger than life. And even if we go back and throughout history, even the word demon, it has two definitions. It could be a messenger, or it could mean to divide destinies, which is very fascinating. But when I was researching this as a kid and growing up in it, it didn't really take too long before I realized, okay, a lot of our ancestors did experience something that was genuine, but they begin to use their descriptions of the events to define what they were experiencing. And I think that's what really evolved into this concept of horns and hooves and the legend of fallen angels being demons. I'm sure that we're going to get into it tonight, but I can prove to you throughout scripture that these fallen angels are not they're not, they're formerly human beings. They're not just horns and hooves that fell from some Mount Olympus. And I'll shut up.
Well,
that's all I got to say about that.
That's about all I have to say about that.
Yeah.
That is no better a Forrest Gump moment than any other in the world.
That's right.
But
that's all I got to say about that.
But before we really jump off that cliff, that's far beyond jumping a shark. That's literally jumping off a cliff of research and information and history that. Not that is necessarily lost, but that it seems like even our world religions just really don't want to talk about anymore.
Correct.
And we'll be getting into that. But before we do, let's get into you, Nathaniel. Right. How did you get into this? Because once again, as I said in our pre-conversation, demonology is a deep field. That's I mean, it's not like you were like, I think I'm gonna go to culinary school.
Cook up some demons.
I really like making steak.
Yeah.
What was it? I mean, that's one of those that no, I don't think that people really get into the seminary with the clique mentality of I'm gonna go be an exorcist.
Correct.
So how was it that you went down the literal spiritual rabbit hole of demonology?
Okay, so there were three things going on simultaneously as a kid, So the very first thing that happened to me was my parents decided to move out of their house and buy a new house. And we went to go tour this new house. And while we were in the house, my dad said, he goes, this is going to be your future room if we actually buy the home. He says, so take a look around, figure out where you're going to put your gaming system, your bed and everything. He said, your mother and I are going to go talk to the realtor in the kitchen. And so I'm looking around the room, and I can still remember when I first walked in, I could smell what, to me as a kid, it smelled like sulfur. But I guess the best description would be a rancid stench of rotting flesh. It hit me like a wind. It wasn't like I walked into it. No, I felt it walk into me. And when it did, I smelled it and I thought, oh my God, there's something wrong with this room. I definitely don't want to move in the house, and I definitely don't want to, I don't want to stay in this room if we do move in. So when I went in the room, I'm looking around, and I was drawn to the corner, and there was a bed there. And for some unknown reason, I knelt down and I picked up the little blanket and pulled it up. And when I did, I was met face to face with a full-bodied apparition of a pale-faced little girl. She had to have been about 6 years old. She had long black hair. And when we looked at each other, it was as if she was as frightened as I was. She instantly recoiled and shimmied her body all the way to the back of the wall to where she was the furthest from me. So later on that night, we're on the way home, and I'm asking my dad how it went, and he asked me, what did you think about the room? What do you think about the house? I said, I think there's something in it. And I told him about my experience. He kind of laughed it off. He's like, well, you know what? He goes, maybe it's maybe you imagine it, or maybe it's a dream, or whatever. I'm like, no, that was a real experience. I'm not crazy. That's literally what happened.
Yeah.
Come to find out that the people that owned the house were elderly, and when they died, it was an estate sale, and so they didn't have a 6-year-old girl. So once we actually moved in the house, I got to know the neighbors. I got to know more stories about the house, and come to find out, that house was haunted. And upon moving in, the longer I stayed there, the more this malevolent spirit mutated. So it was no longer a little girl. It mutated into shadow figures. There was one night I was playing a video game at night, and I looked in the corner of my room, and there was a window, and I saw something just move. Like I couldn't decipher what it was, and then I fixed my eyes on it. And once my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could see a full body. It was literally a shadow figure that was 7 feet tall, and it was just staring at me. And then it tilted its head, and then I went screaming to my parents. So that was my introduction, or my confrontation with this species of apocalyptic evil. And then at the same time, I was attending a local church body that was telling me what I was going through wasn't real, and that that either I was crazy or I needed to go get help. So that's really what drove me into this field. It's definitely not a curiosity; it's a calling.
Yeah.
These entities will victimize people who want to be rubbernecks and say, you know what, that's really cool. Let me go find something. No, that's not what needs to happen. I mean, these entities, they play by their rules. And we're just now trying to understand them.
Well, and that I think that was probably, I get a lot of press kits. Let's just say, I get a lot of prep sheets from guests. I even have my own prep sheets that I send to people. But that was one of the most interesting quotes in your prep sheet, was the idea that we don't understand the rules because they're playing by a totally different game.
They are. And it's absolutely horrifying.
And a lot of that game, so to speak, I think comes down to, once again, that classical dichotomous definition that we're looking for between angel and demon.
Correct.
Which allows them to on us in so many ways. Yeah. Like think if it was like a sleazy guy trying to go out with your sister, and you kept being like, something about that dude just ain't right.
Exactly. And you know what the most terrifying aspect of this is? We don't even know them, or just go with it, man. Just go with it. We don't even know what their morality is. That's the biggest issue here. I could say this much. Once I started researching the paranormal, I realized very quickly that the Catholic Church is wrong. Not in terms of just, their idea of the paranormal, but their exorcistic rite, the holy water, comes out of Numbers 19 and 11. I've told you this before in the pre-interview. This is not about horns and hooves and about fallen angels or even pitchforks. This is about disincarnate consciousness. In Numbers 19 and 11, the entire idea of throwing holy water on the possessed comes from people who come into contact with disincarnate consciousness. I'm getting passionate. Sorry.
It's all right. It's okay.
But,
this show's all about being passionate, my man. Never apologize for that on here.
Okay. But yeah, it's disincarnate consciousness. So in my research with respect to the exorcistic rite, I always thought, man, why did this work? How does it work? Where did this come from? And I realized that the Catholic Church has based the legitimacy of their exorcistic rite on the rate of success and not on the reason for it.
Yeah.
And so they think, oh my God, because it's working, our theology must be right. No, their theology is wrong. Their demonology is wrong. You're not dealing with horns and hooves. You're dealing with consciousness. And that's why they're cleansing people from, corpse pollution. So I think that was really a head turner for me. That's when I really started to think, oh my God, this phenomenon itself needs to be better understood And not only that, but the evangelical movement, your Protestant, all that. We all need to expand our idea of this because in many cases, I think we're wrong.
Well, and because once again, we're dealing with that post-Zoroastrian concept of good versus evil, the dichotomy of both of them stemming from the same root. Right. The whole concept, even if you go back and please feel free. I don't care. I'm gonna back this page up just a second so that people can see all the different versions you can choose. I tend to go for like New American, maybe even New Jerusalem, mainly because those tend to use the original Coptic, or not Coptic, but the original Hebrew text, the original Greek text, things like that.
Exactly right.
Instead of a translation of a translation. If you're translating any Bible from Latin, that is woefully bad. You're literally like trying to tell a Japanese joke to somebody in Mexico.
Oh my God, yeah, and the language barrier is profound. Yeah. I mean, imagine, I was married to a Colombian girl, and it was so interesting because I was talking to her one day, and her mother speaks fluent Spanish, and I'm like, I'm trying to tell her what it means to eat your heart out, right? She didn't know what it meant. She took it literally, right? That's how the language barrier, right? It's really bad.
Yeah.
Like, so we have to understand it. Yeah, you're exactly right. But getting back to the corpse pollution concept,
yes,
that's why the exorcistic rite works. That's why it's successful. And again, if we're gonna, because I know you're now. Here's a question: can your listeners see what you're doing right now?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. They can all see, what you're seeing is what they see.
Yes. Okay, cool. Let's dive into this chapter. Actually,
absolutely.
Let's look at the what's called sympathetic magic.
Yep.
This is how I know these entities perform magic, because Yahweh is giving the Levitical priesthood a ritual, an antidote to a sin they didn't commit. Oh my God, this is going to get good. Now, it talks about the holy water and how you have to baptize them and all that stuff. But even more than that, it talks about how they're going to burn the red heifer, they're going to burn the ashes, mix it with water, and then they're going to drink it. Now, let's look at the symbology here. Let's look at the imagery. If you have something red and you drink it, that's what he's talking about. Now, in the law of sympathetic magic works because someone levels a curse on another person, and that person also levels an antidote to that curse. But in the antidote, it carries the curse in it itself, right? That's how it's reversed. And so your rabbis not only said that we're dealing with corpse pollution, but we're also dealing with entities that will eat blood. Oh, my God, right? That's the symbology and the imagery. So what we're dealing with here, again, it's not just possession, but we're dealing with what I call the commandeering of consciousness.
All right. And that's something that we had talked about before numerous times with our good friend Archbishop James Cloud. The idea, we were talking about it before the show, the idea that not necessarily are a lot of people possessed demoniacally, but in that sense of Father Malachi Martin, they are more to the point of spiritual obsession, which is the point
Correct.
where you have relinquished some sort of control over your free will, be it through hey, ask James Cloud, like he's like, enjoy your reefer if you want, I guess enjoy your sorcery, like straight up. And I was like, by all biblical definition, yep.
Yes.
Yep. I can see where you're saying that. And if you're saying it in that way, then yeah, that can definitely be something that can weaken you spiritually. That can be something that can put you into the mind frame of, let's say, leaving that spiritual window open for the lost boys to walk through.
Exactly right. So possession being the total abandonment of oneself, where there is a sense of covenant created. Now, I don't say that just because of my research. I have field experience as well. I mean, I dealt with a murder case where the entity was a living being at one time, and he told his daughter, "I will kill you one day. I will kill you." He died. And then he possessed his granddaughter, and then the granddaughter killed the mom, which was this man's daughter. So it was an incredible case, but it taught me a lot about how these entities work. For some reason, they need human involvement. The murder case, it included a 13-year-old girl, which was a daughter, and there was a 15-year-old girl that she knew from school. The 15-year-old girl could not get into the house, so she had the 13-year-old girl open the door about 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, here's a question, guys. We know for sure these entities can open their own doors, right?
Sure.
They can walk through them. We also know, according to Deborah Moffitt's case and other case studies, that they can throw daggers. They can do anything. I mean, Malachi Martin died because there's a shadow figure that kicked a stool out from under his feet.
Yep. Yep.
So what this entity needed, though, was human cooperation. I could open my own door, but that's not really what I need. I need you to open the door for me.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a measure of consent going on. But again, I mean, even just the base level we're talking about, this is bending the rules of demonology as we know it. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is really stepping into their territory. Why do they need human cooperation? Why do they need that permission and covenant relationship for them to do what they're doing? And furthermore, how are they manipulating us to get that permission? That's terrifying. And,
it's interesting that you bring up the term covenant relationship, because especially if you go back to at least ancient Judaic practice, things like that, to, quote, cut a covenant with someone was to literally like take an animal and sacrifice it and split it in half and walk between it and say like, hey, yeah, the same thing will happen to me if we break this covenant.
Yes. So that's Abraham. That's very good. I love your knowledge about the Bible, man. This is intense. I love it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the stuff that, once again, like, it's there, people. It's not hard. Feel free to like read the footnotes, man.
Yes,
read the little squiggly words at the bottom, not just the big red ones.
Yeah. You're exactly right. It should be that simple.
And
it's right there.
It's right there, and it's just phenomenal. Like we were saying in our pre-conversation, even in Leviticus, when they literally make this jump. And just so you know, folks, Leviticus is that book in the Bible in the Old Testament. That's the book of Judaic law. These are the books of how to ritualistically cleanse yourself before coming into temple. You should not lay with a woman that's ritualistically unclean. You shouldn't lust after your aunt. You shouldn't be thinking about doing things with goats. Is in there. And then suddenly it just jumps the shark and goes like, oh yeah, and no necromancy. No cavorting with the spirits of dead people.
Exactly right. Yeah. Oh man, this is getting good. And again, like I told you in the pre-interview, our rabbis in antiquity, we had no idea where that came from, right? Because again, they're getting an antidote to a disease that they didn't even know existed.
Well, and
like, what are you talking about? That, you know what I mean? Like, where does it come from?
What's interesting though is that the concept of disembodied souls re-embodying was not a foreign concept in ancient Israel.
Right.
It was very well understood. The idea of even reincarnation within familial line.
Yes.
Was just accepted. Like it was almost the norm.
Yeah, and when we realize that when the authors of the Bible were writing these texts, they were aware of this.
Yeah, that's where the whole concept of sins of the fathers comes from.
Exactly right. Even when Paul, now we're getting into theology, which I never talk about, but
go ahead.
It's so interesting. Yeah, even when Paul's talking about Christ being buried with Christ, I mean, he's talking about ancient burial rites. And so if we don't get their funerary rites in context and we don't know what he's talking about, I mean, we'll miss his point entirely.
Yeah.
Because their historical context of burial rites was you're going to be buried with your ancestor. And then you'll both be resurrected. Now, what's he talking about? He says that Jesus is our elder brother, and we are buried with him. Why? because he's saying we're buried with him to be resurrected with him. So my point is this: forget about theology for a second. Let's look at the ancient historical contexts. That's what is the most fascinating aspect of my work, to me at least, because I think that even the UFO abduction phenomenon and demonology, both of these fields of study, they're all rooted in our understanding of the afterlife, period. Even demonology, if you go back to, again, the disincarnate consciousness and how people would go into houses, and it wasn't just touching a body that corrupted them, it was the consciousness that left that body that would fill them. That's what we're talking about with possession, and that's why the exorcistic rite of Catholicism works. We're not dealing with horns and hooves, we're dealing with consciousness, right? That's why it works. And so when we're dealing with the afterlife, we need to realize that Genesis 6 is playing right into the hands of what's happening right now in the UFO abduction phenomenon. So I'll stop, man, but it's getting deep.
Well, let's go into that real quick, because I mean, I think once again the two go hand in hand.
Right.
Because it really is that concept of it could be good, it could be bad. It's the idea of the classic daemon, where it's your interaction of will that defines the actions of the daemon. I mean go read any version of the Greater or Lesser Key of Solomon. That's precisely what it's about. Like, here's this favored son of God who was literally given command over the angels and demons.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
it's
I think a lot of that, of course, goes into the ancient Hebrew concept of us being us being uniquely breathed into by the divine during creation, things like that. But let's get back onto the concept of demons and how they are infiltrating the world around us unbeknownst to us. Because, like you're saying, even the modern concept of the UAP UFO phenomenon traces into this.
It does very heavily, and my best advice is I mentor a lot of people into this field, and I tell everybody that I mentor, first of all, we need to get rid of definitions for now. We need to get rid of descriptions, like not just descriptions, but making descriptions definitions. Because what happened to our ancestors is that they would witness a famine, and then they would apply agency to what they were experiencing. So, I'm not just hungry. Somebody authored this famine. Somebody meant for this famine to happen. And then they would say, well, that entity that authored this famine, he must be a demon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was that redhead kid that was born 3 weeks ago.
Right, yeah.
Put him in the river.
So, exactly right. You got it, man. It's fascinating. It's sad that our ancestors were that,
my God, man! I thought you were talking about like last week on Twitter. I had no idea that you were talking about our ancestors, because literally the mentality has not changed; it's just shifted.
It has not.
The tribal scared mentality of the 1500s and the specter of death has changed not one lick.
Right. And again, let's look at the UFO abduction phenomenon.
Yeah.
We need to stop looking at apparitions in terms of, oh my God, it's a mantid being, it's a Nordic being, it's a gray. I don't think they're any of those. I think they're ghosts. I think they're translucent beings. And even deeper than that, I don't really believe that they're going to manifest to us in terms of what they really look like. So I'm going to get very deep, and I'm going to use some imagery here. I think the only apparition we can see of them is their behavioral patterns.
Interesting.
Right? What are they doing? What are they really after? Because, even in my field of demonology, I work with women all across the world who are encountering the incubus spirit. I'm talking about, I've worked with women who said that the incubus spirit would always come to them and try to make love to them. And then once they had a hysterectomy, the entity never visited them again. So this gets deep, man. So what we're doing right now in demonology, it's the same questions we were asking 3,000, 2,000 years ago. I do not believe these entities, these incubi spirits or the UFO abduction, I don't believe that these entities are visiting our women for purposes of pleasure, because they're only visiting women who have the ability to procreate. Oh, this gets good. Very interesting. In terms of seducing them, there has to be a measure of procreation there.
Okay.
So why?
Well, I mean, the only reason I can think of that there has to be a measure of procreation there is because I mean, nowhere in any religious text does it say that a demon is a fully spiritual being.
Correct.
As a matter of fact, just about all of them refer to the fact that they are driven sexually. Even the Watchers, according to the Nephilim history, know, the whole reason and causation for the flood was their mating with human females.
Correct. Now, did they use their seed, or did they use human seed?
Oh, well, right. I mean, it never really says.
It doesn't. And so the incubi phenomenon is the same thing we're dealing with in Genesis 6. Now, what's fascinating about this, Vaught, is how, like Father Sinastrari of Amino, he was a Franciscan priest. He had victims of incubi spirits. He would go into the homes an hour after the event taking place, and he would collect semen samples. Now, I'm going to suggest something that is very troubling. But when we get into the vampirology, we get into the folklore regarding vampires, before they sucked blood, these were necromancers who would go into graveyards and milk the carcasses of the recently deceased. Now, do you want to know what they were taking from the recently deceased?
Oh, God, yes.
Okay, semen and ova.
And what would I mean, and that would have to be like, of course, as we know by most modern science, fairly recently deceased, for any of that to be viable, at least by our technology.
Exactly right. And so our ancestors, whenever somebody died, they buried them as quickly as possible. Matter of fact, by the way, that's also why your Watchers, oh man, this hit me like a brick when I first learned this. Your Watchers that's mentioned in Genesis and in I think it was Daniel, they were mortal. What happened was our ancestors, even in Hebrew theology, their funerary rites say that they were also experiencing these entities that would go and milk the carcasses of the dead. So what they began to do is they would go out into the village or the city, and they would hire someone to watch the body of their recently deceased family member. They would leave for 7 days, and that watcher was in charge of watching that body and protecting it from other animals, other predators, and other spirits.
Which would I
myself
am Cajun by upbringing and just old enough to have been at many traditional wakes where we accompanied the corpse through the night.
Yes. That's the original Watcher. Oh man, it's getting good. Now I grew up in Christian theology, but my dad left that I guess understanding and went more into the messianic understanding of the Bible. And so that means that I got to meet a bunch of rabbis, you know. He went to what's called Hebrew Roots Movement. And so I literally, there's a guy I can call in Brooklyn right now, you know, he's Orthodox. And so, I grew up with these teachings. I know what they teach. What's fascinating about this is that these Watchers were forbidden to touch the dead body. because it's called the forbidden touch. You'd be defiled by touching the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so then we have to ask ourselves, what sin did these watchers really commit in Genesis 6? Right?
Interesting. Yeah, yeah.
They didn't just touch. Remember what I told you about intimacy and how they're taking seed in Nova? What were they doing? They were copulating with corpses.
Well, and that would absolutely put itself right there, especially whenever you go into Numbers 13. Anyone who touches a dead body, the body of a person who has died, and does not purify himself, defiles the tabernacle of the Lord. And that person shall be cut off from Israel.
Yes, sir. So now what's fascinating about this is we are just now starting to see a behavioral pattern, right? And this is the behavioral pattern of a necromancer.
and let's define what that is, because a lot of our audience may not be, because number one, welcome to all of our new members. Welcome to all of our new members of alternative lifestyles in numerous ways. And I hope that you are enjoying this episode, because I want to dispel a lot of myth. That's the whole reason I do this show, is to dispel people's misunderstandings, and for people to think that like Satanists are out there like trying to find their cat and stuff like that. Like not the case. And it's it's naivete on their part, and I guess to an extent ignorance to the fact. And I think a lot of people misunderstand and are ignorant of what we're talking about here regarding demons, things like that. Once again, the fact that they have not only the power but the right to be whatever we like. It's straight up Gozer the Destroyer. Like, you choose the form of the Destroyer. It might be Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Or
Mickey Mouse. When we have kids that are being abducted and they're witnessing Mickey Mouse in the abduction, they're not Mickey Mouse.
Yeah,
right.
or even people whose will is being abducted through horribly means like alcohol, hard drug addiction, things like that. Right. Where the world may write off the fact of like, you chose your horrible path. Yes and no, sometimes.
Exactly. Very good point. You're exactly right. One thing that I will suggest to you, because I know you have a background in theology too. Have you ever read Ezekiel chapter 13 and how it plays a role in the UFO abduction phenomenon?
Yes.
Soul hunters, those who hunt the souls of men to make them fly. We're dealing with necromancers. Not just necromancers that will go out and dig a body up, but we're talking about entities that will kill someone to harvest their consciousness.
Well, and you've mentioned that a couple times, the disembodied consciousness, the idea of which is of course one of the caveats against sorcery, things like that.
Correct.
Even the idea of strong drink being in the realm of sorcery, other things that are imbibed by ancient cultures and modern being a form of sorcery. All of those things are something which can take you perhaps to a place that you may not be necessarily cognizant of all that is actively surrounding you.
Yeah, and in demonology, especially with your witch era literature, we would call that scatology. Now, scatology was what you would drink. It would change. It would alter your mind. It would alter your consciousness. Something that you would actually anoint yourself with. Hello, Hebrew theology, prophets. That would alter their consciousness. And what we're really dealing with are entities that will intentionally place us as a species into a state of being, a state of dream, a state of sleep, where they will separate our soul from our body. Now, where I first got that from This is very unique. I first saw that when I was reading a paper about Ezekiel 13. And I thought, man, I've been at church my whole life. I thought, man, I knew a lot. I had a good grasp on Hebrew and Greek theology and all this stuff. And then I'm sitting there in my office and I'm holding this paper. My hands started shaking. I went, oh my God. Oh my God. Because Yahweh's at war with false prophets who have the ability to hunt the souls of men. Now, that's a different kind of evil, right? Yeah. The only evil we know now of is serial killers, and they're still obviously like the darkest, worst nightmare of Stephen King, right? They're awful. But these entities are different. They hunt the souls of men. Now, this gets back to Genesis 6.
Okay.
These, in Genesis 6, they were necromancers. Now, remember how I was talking about behavioral patterns and how that's really the only way we can understand them, or at least follow the footprints of their actions. Genesis 6 is not the only narrative or story about what happened, okay? Neither is the book of Enoch. Matter of fact, the book of Enoch is the least accurate, I should say. I know Michael Heiser's going to kill me. I know he will. I love Heiser. Love you, Heiser, if you're listening to this. But I'm going to say, all right, listen, man, I'm going to say this much, okay? There are other, they might not be as authoritative, right, with respect to what, Christians think, but other texts have much more of a handle on their manifestations, right?
Yeah.
Now, one of them is the Apocryphon of John. It's a Coptic manuscript preserved by Egyptian monks.
Yep.
They give a description that's a lot alike, Genesis 6, the Hebrew Bible, but it's more specific. It says that these entities waited until the husbands of the wives were absent. Like they went to get a beer, they went to go shopping, they went to get food, whatever.
Yeah.
But then these entities manifested to these wives in the image of their husband. Oh, wait a minute. That's when my ear turned up. I went, oh my God. Then they groomed these wives into intercourse. Now we have to remember, these women thought they were making love to their husband, right? They thought they were making love to someone they're in covenant with.
Wow.
But they weren't. Because you know theology. You don't know exactly. I'm telling you, you're going to hear Paul screaming in the darkness right now. If another angel comes to you with what, right? Another gospel.
Yeah.
Another spirit. Oh, man. All right. I'm getting triggered, dude. Because you know how rare it is for me to talk to somebody, I guess, that knows a lot about theology. It's fascinating, man. I'm telling you. We definitely got to go bowling.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Because, I mean, and I've got that part up right now from Ezekiel talking about the
let's dive into that real quick.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. You ready? Okay, woe to the women who sew magic bands on. What do you mean magic bands? All wrists and make veils for the heads of persons of every stature. Now, do you want to know the interpretation of persons of every stature? Those are your giants of Nephilim.
And the who sew magic bands on all wrists. That I mean that almost sounds as though you are cutting a pagan covenant, as though you were doing a hand fasting.
Now, what's fascinating about this, oh, man, it's going to blow your mind. When you get into that text, what you realize is what they were doing was cutting pieces of flesh off of their victims and then sewing it onto what's called the social skin. Now, let's get back to, real quick, keep having it up there. This is incredible. Let's go back for a moment to why these entities in Genesis 6 manifested to women in the image of their husbands. They were performing a necromantic ritual. So what happened was, at the moment of conception, they stared into the eyes of these female victims, and then they reversed their apparition to what they originally looked like. Oh my God, they're ghosts, right? So here's why. They had, it's called an obstetric tradition. Obstetric is just a reference to childbearing and fertility. They believed that whatever man the woman was focused upon at the moment of conception, she will birth the material image of as a child. right? What are we dealing with here? We're dealing with apparitions that are creating bodies that look like themselves. I am a ghost. I want a body that looks like me. Now we're going to find it in Ezekiel 13. I will also tear off your veils and save my people from your hands. I see where you're at. They will no longer be in your hands as prey, and you know that I am the Lord. Now let's see here. Now we're going to deal with the currency of consciousness. You ready?
Sure.
Okay. We're going to go to verse 18. Woe to the women who sew magic bands on all wrists. Okay, and make veils for the heads of persons of every statue. Now, I need to give, this is interesting. When we're talking about blankets, pillowcases, and veils, it's the same Hebrew word for skin.
Huh.
Now, watch this. This is going to absolutely blow your mind. What is he talking about? Remember how I told you that they're creating social bodies, social skins? They're creating babies that look like their apparitions?
Yeah.
That's what, yeah. So then he says, I will
no
also
longer
tear
see
off
deceitful visions or practice divination.
No. Right. Now, also, watch this. This is incredible. He's talking about seeing divination, seeing deceitful visions.
Yeah.
Why? He's referring. See, God remembers. Yahweh remembers. He's referring back to Genesis 6. You came to these people in the image of, oh my God, ready? In the image of a covenant.
Yeah.
All right, now let's see here. Will you capture the souls of my people? Here we go now. This is the currency of consciousness. But keep the souls of others alive for yourselves.
That is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, verse 19. For handfuls of barley and pieces of bread, you have profaned me to my people to put to death some who should not die. Now, here it is. Some who should not die, to keep others alive who should not live.
Wow.
That is the currency of consciousness.
And
killing.
And necromancy.
Yes, sir. Oh, my Lord.
Like, that is straight up the necromancy. Right. Not only to consort with the dead, but to bring them to life.
That shook me to my core. I thought, oh my God. Like I said, I'm in my office. I put the paper down and I called my dad. I said, Dad, we got a very big problem. Very big problem. Because he's not just acknowledging the fact that they can do it. Right? He's acknowledging that they can do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I'll shut up.
Well,
Dude,
and just the fact that there it is, like, you have profaned me to my people and put to death some who should not die. Like, right. So they basically did this in God's name.
Yes.
In the guise of somebody there to help them, as is oddly their, I guess, quote, cosmic right, as daemon to be claiming. Either helpful or hurtful.
Yes.
Deceive at will.
Dude, it's wild. It's very rare, like I said, that I get to talk to somebody who has that kind of theological background and degree where you understand this. But what we're dealing with here is a species that uses us to self-replicate.
Yeah.
They use our women. And not only that, but they're here to help us.
Well, and I mean, even God says, like, right there, by lying to my people who listen to lies.
Yes. So now there's a translation.
He definitely knows the fact that we are prone to be led astray.
Of course. That's why he said, you shall not make any graven image. Why? Because these entities will manifest as that image.
Well, and that's interesting. Let's go into that for a minute, because that's something that I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten. And don't get me wrong, I got pictures all over the place. I got pictures up on the screen. But one of the things that we talk about a lot on this show is intent.
Right.
And the idea that, for instance, I'm no fan of the former president, things like that, but before he was elected, there was a coven of witches nationally who were like, we're going to put a hex on Donald Trump. And it's like, isn't that whole concept like do no harm to others?
Yeah, they don't really.
Or it'll be revisited on you like threefold, you know. And then later on, it was like, this didn't take, so we're going to do it again. It's like, yo, man, calm it down. And then like COVID happened. It's like, calm it down.
It's interesting, isn't it? Oh my God.
One of my favorite scenes in any movie, one of my favorite movies, hands down ever, is The Exorcist. Of that movie.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite pieces of trivia is that Pazuzu, the demon who possesses Reagan in that movie, comes to her as through a spirit board in the basement as the spirit Captain Howdy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Howdy.
And yeah, like she brings her mom down to show her this game that she found in the base. She's like, oh, we used to play this when we were kids. It's just a game. She's like, no, you need to meet Captain Howdy. And that was, you know, it's kind of that idea of she gave that consent. Totally deceived into giving that consent. But she gave that consent to demoniac possession.
Exactly right. And usually they always approached you in terms of like, I'll help you. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And getting back to idolatry, that's what Yahweh's talking about. Now, I want to make sure everybody understands this. You know, because I do shows and people say, man, you talk a lot about the Bible. You didn't talk about Mesopotamia. When you're reading the Bible, you're reading Mesopotamian texts.
Yeah.
I mean, even there, you know, a lot of people don't know that, but it's necessary to understand that before we dive into these texts, because the authors of these passages, they inherited, it's called migratory loan words and migratory concepts. So the Hebrews were a migrant, like they migrated. And so they would pick up concepts and different ideas of demons wherever they were at.
And they were also enslaved by no less than 3 local cultures for millennia.
Exactly right.
For millennia.
Exactly right.
So in addition to their culture, they adopted their belief.
Right. And so I just want to make sure that there's not a listener out there who says, you know what, all you guys are talking about is the Bible. Well, you know, get bigger. We're getting bigger.
Yeah.
You know, we are bigger right now. It's just you have to realize how big we are in terms of the text that we're discussing. But like, look what Yahweh did. Okay, let's look at idolatry. In biblical antiquity, they had familial gods. And so what happened was, this is where possession comes from and all that stuff. But what happened was, when somebody died in your family, they would, they would bury their family member underneath the house, and it's called intramural burial. And then they would create a metallic image of that ancestor, and the consciousness of that ancestor would possess the image.
Yeah.
Now, here's why Yahweh said, don't make an image out of me. Why? Because something else will possess that image.
Yes.
And this gets interesting too. I'm sorry. I know you're going to say something. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I was going to say that goes directly back to the Kabbalistic concept of the golem.
Yes,
it goes straight into the Kabbalistic and magical concept of the egregore, which is basically the golem on a societal level, where a group of people are putting their intent into something, which is where coven, even where mass and things like that come from, and the concept of intended prayer by a group. So I mean, all these things are echoes of each other, and it's just one of those, like, if people don't see it, I'm sorry for your narrow focused view.
You're right.
Because it literally is that, and no fault to him, because I'm definitely one of those people that there are moments in life where I am a horse with blinders on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you put me in my element of 10,000 people at a conference, I'm a horse with blinders on, man. My focus is on work. You put me in that same situation without blinders, and it may not be the fun experience of your carriage ride.
You might not have a good time.
You know what I mean?
You are.
And the thing is, a lot of people don't understand that the whole purpose, like you're saying, behind the have no graven image is because it would act like the concept of the golem, whether you intended it to or not.
Right.
Because of the fact that you or a group of people had this intent toward that, it could draw some other wandering spirit to it to embody it. And then say, do this bidding.
Sir.
And all you know is that it's trading on the dollar bill of God.
Exactly right. And that's why he said they're false prophets, right?
Yeah.
And look, this is interesting too. This is also why your UFO abductees are not seeing the historical Jesus. We don't have an image of him. They're seeing a white Swedish Presbyterian, blue-eyed, blonde-haired Jesus that never existed, but only in their minds. What that means is they're plucking our idolatry out.
Yeah.
Oh, this gets deep, man. We got to do another show.
Well, no, like shows and shows and shows, because this is it. This is quite literally something. And we had a comment actually a little while ago from one of our listeners, James Dancer, listener and guest. Hey, James. When a fish sees a scuba diver, it doesn't see what we actually look like. Same thing with us and demons.
Exactly right. That is thank you, James. That's brilliant. He's exactly right. It's troubling. Again, what they're doing is they're conforming to our beliefs, and we're tapping into it. So I think that's that consent aspect of it, right? Where's that covenant begin?
Well, and we're really giving it consent by default. We're giving it consent, and it's shameful and it's horrible to say it, folks, but you're giving it consent by hope.
yes, exactly right.
Like, it's almost so defeatist to say, and I'm not saying that there is no reason to pray, that there is no God, that the demons have won. Run. That's not what. Well, that's not what I'm saying, because you can't run. They're demons.
You said it's not because we have hope. We just can't run, right?
There is no hope. Listen. But that's not what we're saying here, Nathaniel. What we're saying is that we give. It's almost that Freddy Krueger concept of we give it the power that we give it.
We do. I had somebody that contacted me last year. It's a girl from India. She's like 28 years old. She told me. She said she's been with 8 different men in her life, and she said this entity has manifested in the image of every one of those lovers.
Wow.
Now, right? What's it doing? They're looking to self-replicate.
Now, why? I mean, number one, you have to consider these things lived far beyond when we did.
Yes.
They've been here much longer than us. Be here much longer than us. Why the need to replicate?
Well, I think they're recruiting dead people. I think that, again, if we look at history,
doesn't sound freaking creepy at all.
Yeah, right. No, I'm telling you, it's the worst. I'm telling you, it's an apocalyptic species of evil. But again, if we're looking at apparitions that need a body again, of course they're going to do what they're doing. Of course they would pick out people who can reproduce, right? Like I said, like they're not going to men that are sterile and collecting semen samples. They're going to men that can actually procreate. And so, the theory that has long been in the minds of demonologists was, okay, do they have their own seed? Or, do demons have their own seed? I don't think they do. Not at all. The law in the Bible was that every species, it creates what it creates. It self-replicates. You can't mix seeds. Even farmers don't mix seeds. It was when it's in the Torah.
Well, you aren't going to end up with like a rhino and tiger mix by nature.
Right. Exactly right. Right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And so what they're doing, I think, is it's far darker than that. My research lately has led me to believe that they're not just, have you ever heard of the missing fetus syndrome, first of all?
I have, but I've heard of a lot of wild things.
Okay.
Let's just say my ranch is an ankle breaker with all the rabbit holes that are on the property.
I see what you're putting down. I'm picking up what yeah.
I mean, that's one of the many topics that I've been wanting to do a specific episode on. Things like that. Well, even the whole concept of like the harvesting of adrenochrome.
Yeah. We could do a show on that too. I mean, I'm not saying that like I'm just saying that it's very rare that I get on a show with somebody who really like this is a vibe, right? We can go anywhere with this. So that's what I'm saying.
Go ahead.
I mean, we could do so, but with the missing fetus syndrome, man, which I've been on shows with people where the hosts have had this happen before, where these entities will appear to them in a dream. It's just like the debug phenomenon in the 16th century. And they're thinking they're having intercourse in the middle of a dream. Like it's just fake, right? And it's not, it's real. And then they become pregnant. And we're throughout history, we've been dealing with marriages that have had problems, right? So they're not intimate. And then somehow the woman's pregnant. And then they lose the baby. Either the baby dies in the womb or the baby completely disappears. Like there are women right now that are going to the doctor like for like gynecological issues, and the doctor does like a test and stuff and an ultrasound and says, you know what, you have birth tissue in your afterbirth, and you have like like scar tissue, like you don't have a kid, do you? No, I don't.
Yeah.
Now there's a documentary that's out there. It's called The Extraordinary Seeding. You need to watch that because this is what I'm talking about.
All right.
So now what I'm dealing with now in my research, and this is literally like to date, what I'm thinking is that they're not just harvesting babies, right? They're not just inseminating women and then taking the baby out of them. I think that they're taking consciousness out of the baby. I think they're 2 steps ahead of us.
Now,
which would go back.
Because let's get back to this. This is probably, I'd say, at least a handful of times now that you have mentioned this concept of disembodied consciousness, and I really want to explore that because and crack the nut of it, because I think that it's something that not a lot of people consider. I've been wanting to have whenever John McAfee died, kind of off topic but not quite. One of our guests, Dr. Robert Duncan, mentioned that, oh man, my friend John McAfee died. I don't know who I'm going to have my ongoing conversation about a firewall for the human brain with. And even now, there are articles right now, I've posted them on Dudes and Beer, about advertisers wanting to reach into dreams. Now, I'm one of those people. I do. You can see right here, I got screens. I'm looking at a screen. There's a screen here. There's a graphic screen here. Like, I got screens everywhere, my friend. But I do not have one in my bedroom. And I refuse to. And that's because, I do a lot of dream work. Have specifically in the last year restarted my dream work of intended meditation, going to sleep, kind of walking down a path looking for an answer, kicking rocks up, things like that. And that's good things, that could be bad things, No different than playing around with a Ouija board. What's your intent? But the question is, are you leaving windows cracked? Are you leaving things open? So because I do work like that to begin with, I tend to be pretty livid in my dream, but I don't have that opportunity for something to sneak through. And for centuries, it's not until like actually almost post-depression era worldwide that people stopped covering mirrors after a death in a family. And mostly because like viewings, things like that, where that wake happened in the familial environment. You were being buried at home. stuff like that, where like there was a block of ice in the living room and people came by for a few days and visited, things like that. But I think a lot of people have lost track of that idea and maybe have perhaps given a bit of consent over, you know, whether it be hanging out with your phone face up at night, what have you.
Right.
How much does that come into play, the familiar means of that connection with the other side, whether we intend it or not?
You know, with the mirror thing, it's very interesting because one of my mentors is Dr. Michael Lynch.
Oh, wow.
And in my mind, he's a legend, dude. And he was telling me about some of the experiences that he had in, doing investigations. And he told me, he didn't know I was reading this ancient text at the time, but he told me about the mirror. And he said that the reason our ancestors would cover the mirror is not because they were trying to get rid of the ghost. It's because that the ghost, when it looked at itself in the mirror, would realize it was dead. Yeah. It's fascinating. So the text I was reading was an ancient Lamishtu text. It's a demonology text. It was about how Lamishtu, again, the behavioral pattern, she would manifest to women at night and then stare into their eyes and then take their baby. This is UFO abduction. Yeah. And so what they begin to do as an amulet, a religious amulet, a way of defense, is they would create small mirrors and place it underneath their heads, just in case to confuse Lamishtu. Well, even the idea of feng shui mirrors. Yeah. Or not feng shui, qigong, where it's the little mirrors that you put at the window, stuff like that to repel the demons from coming in. Exactly. And these ideas go back across cultures. Exactly. That's what's absolutely amazing. And even the idea of demons being so narcissistic that they are attracted to a mirror, or not even demons, but spirits. Like you said, the whole idea of covering the mirror was so that the spirit of that person in the house would not stay. Yes, they would move forward. Go out of the other places. Don't get distracted by your own self. Don't get scared of the other side because you see yourself as dead. Right. It's fascinating, man. It's fascinating. It's such an in-depth conversation. I mean, a lot of these. What I really enjoyed about this interview, man, is we can go anywhere. Like, I'm talking to somebody who can go anywhere intellectual with me, and we can hang out. Well, well, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate that. And I mean, we will let you go. I know it's typically an hour. Are you good with a little bit more time? I gotta go. Okay, not a problem at all. I got something else because we definitely want to have you, like I said, back again and again and again. And yes, we do typically, but we are typically kind to our first time guests as far as we'll keep you an hour. Oh man, next time we're gonna do 2. I guarantee you. But I guarantee you, we will have you on again. For those of you that have been ringing off on this, thank you so much. Before we let you go, time for shameless self-promotion. We have your stuff up on screen, everything else. I know you, much like us, are in the midst of full-on rebrand. So I am. Let everybody know where they can go to, other than, of course, the Dudes and Beer store, to find your book, everything else. So, I am in the middle of rebranding. My website is njgillis.com, but don't go there right now because, like I said, it's down. I'm rebranding. Me and my agent, we're still trying to figure out, my research is so expansive. Do I want to identify as just a demonologist, right? Or is there something else that I can stretch myself into? Yeah. It's weird, Yeah. We don't have the vocabulary yet. But that's my website. And then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook as the Nathaniel J. Gillis. You guys can find me there. Yep. And, yeah, that's where I'm at, Bob. And it's been an honor to be on with you guys. I
Hey,
really enjoyed myself.
It has been more than an honor to talk with you this evening. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'm sure that we will have numerous conversations, not only on the air but outside of it as well, because there is so much happening in the news that is just like straight up this. It's mind-numbing, not even mind-blowing. So, please do, Nathaniel, hold the line while we close things out with our audience.
Okay.
While you are online checking out the amazing book, A Moment Called Man, as well as the work and other interviews with Nathaniel Gillis, make sure to stop on by the Dudes and Beer podcast. That's where you can find all of our content. That's where you can find everything that we do. Make sure to stop on by Curious Realm, CuriousRealm.com. Google it now. Do it. I control your mind. Google Curious Realm. Until next time, everybody, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Remember, if you can't be good at it. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Dudes and Beer podcast. To listen to our audio streams or chat with us live, download the official Dudes and Beer app for Android and iDevices, available on Google Play and iTunes markets. For more episodes, content, and information, visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find our episodes on Breach.tv, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service.
Download the free app.
Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more about our sponsors and other podcasts on this network, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, drink responsibly.